Sanctions are not penalties created specially to oppress black countries. Only people that are either racist or ignorant see sanctions that way. The same victim mentality is why it is easy for a lot of Africans to assume that the sanctions placed on Zimbabwe are because Americans don't want to see Zimbabwe prosper. Welcome to Citizen Concerned, where we remind you to beware of the comrades. This victim mentality stops many from realizing that there have been countries that have thrived while they were under sanctions. South Africa is one of them. For apartheid to come to an end, it wasn't due to the efforts of the comrades, as they would rather have us believe. If we're just being honest, the comrades did not stand a chance. But fortunately, the international community realized that they had to step in to stop apartheid, and they did. How? Through sanctions. By the time that South Africa got to 1990, more than 20 countries, including America and the United Kingdom, had placed sanctions on South Africa because of apartheid. Notice that these were all white-led countries that wanted black people to have equal rights in South Africa. So sanctions are not a matter of race. And in case we forgot, right within South Africa itself, black people were not the only ones that fought against apartheid. Several white people stood up in opposition because they believed that apartheid and racism were wrong. And for their decision to stand against apartheid, several of them went to prison and many others were murdered by the apartheid government. Such white people include the organization called BIDBZAJJ. It was a human rights organization that fought against the Dompas laws, among many other injustices. Helen Zille of the DA was among the white people that fought against apartheid. She was one of the journalists that exposed the cover-up of Steve Biko's death. Rick Turner, who Mandela described as a source of inspiration, was murdered for his fight against apartheid. Ruth Heyman was one of the first South African women lawyers, and she used her qualification to give free legal advice to black people, especially women, and even represented a lot of them in court free of charge. Dennis Theodore Goldberg was a social campaigner active in the struggle against apartheid. He was accused number 3 in the Rivonia trial alongside Nelson Mandela and Walter Sisulu, where he was also the youngest of the defendants. He was imprisoned for 22 years along with other key members of the anti-apartheid movement. After his release in 1984, he didn't stop. He continued to campaign against apartheid until the apartheid system was fully abolished with the 1994 election. Frederick John Harris was killed by hanging for fighting against apartheid. Ruth First was imprisoned a few times for fighting for black people and was later assassinated via the usage of a bomb in Mozambique while she was in exile. There are several other white men and women that were fighters against apartheid. These are all people that believe that black people are equal to white people and should therefore have the same rights as white people. Even though they fought against apartheid and against racism, these white people have something in common with other white people who fought against racism and racial oppression in other countries. What do they have in common? You rarely ever hear them talk about how they struggled against apartheid, how they fought against racial discrimination. They rarely brag about their involvement for recognition, right? While black people, on the other hand, are quick to mention how they were involved, how they struggled, how they fought against apartheid. And I think they do this to get recognition. And this is very, very common in countries like Zimbabwe, like the Americas, just as it is seen in South Africa. And I think that this evident difference should tell us something. People stood up and fought by our side. They trusted us and thought that we would work together after we got the freedom that they were helping us fight the apartheid government for. Even among black people, there were traitors. There were people who participated in keeping black people down. There were sellouts, people who got anti-apartheid activists arrested, people who got Steve Biko and other activists killed. All the while, we had white people, like those I mentioned earlier, like Abraham Fisher, known as Bram Fischer, who secretly and openly risked a lot for Nelson Mandela, for anti-apartheid activists, and for the Black South Africans as a whole. Do you remember Bram Fischer? The lawyer who co-authored revisions to the Constitution of the ANC in 1943. Fisher, who was part of the legal defense team that helped acquit Mandela and other activists in the treason trial. Fisher, who led Nelson Mandela's legal defense team at the Rivonia trial and fought to change their sentence from death penalty to life imprisonment. As if it wasn't enough that this man had just lost his wife and choosing to fight for the release of the anti-apartheid prisoners instead of mourning for his wife, a few days later, Bram Fischer was arrested himself and held in solitary confinement. He was released and re-arrested and given a bail of £5,000 in 1964 and further endangered his own life by writing the following letter to the court. Indeed, I realize fully that my eventual punishment may be increased by my present conduct. My decision was made only because I believe that it is the duty of every true opponent of this government to remain in this country and to oppose its monstrous policy of apartheid with every means in his power. That is what I shall do for as long as I can. What is needed is for white South Africans to shake themselves out of their complacency, a complacency intensified by the present economic boom built upon racial discrimination. Unless this whole intolerable system is changed radically and rapidly, disaster must follow. Appalling bloodshed and civil war will become inevitable because as long as there is oppression of a majority, such oppression will be fought with increasing hatred. Decades after apartheid, those same white people are now racist. The Americans, the British, the UN, and these South African white people are now racist. For us to say this, are we stupid? Are we ignorant? Are we forgetful? Where is our honor? The minute the ANC and the EFF comrades wind us up, we forget the sacrifices made by white people on behalf of black people. We forget how they fought alongside us against apartheid government. Where is our honor? How quick are we to forget? I want to believe that the education system has caused this, and the EFF and the ANC have taken advantage of it. They want us to believe that white people that don't agree with them are racists. They want you to believe that white people who call you out on littering, on making noise, on being incompetent are doing so because they are racist. There are white people who fought for the freedom of black people just as there are black people that fought against apartheid. Nelson Mandela understood this, and that is why the Rainbow Nation was such a big deal to him. We were on the right path, a path to building a great nation, until the ANC ruined it all with their greed, with their incompetence, their division, their laziness, their corruption, bringing us to the era of people like Malema. The fact that you don't know that several white people in South Africa and abroad fought through activism and through sanctions means that you are going to support Malema when he wants rugby to fall. You will support them when any white person who questions the EFF or the ANC becomes labeled as racist. The fact is, we as people are all different. There are racist white people just as there are racist black people. We all know that racists exist among us. They are there, but they are not all white. All races of people can be racist, all of us. It's also important to know that sometimes some people are not racist out of their own will, because different experiences cause different people to feel differently about everyone else. Black people may actually be the most racist group of people there is today, and not out of our own will, but because of propaganda, because of of our own experiences, because of the experiences relayed to us by our parents, our grandparents, and their parents. We can even see it in how Black people are very vocal about it, But we need to heal, guys. Otherwise, we will never, ever build. We need to start looking ahead.
Thousands of children have died. Thousands of children have seen their mothers being tortured. I was young when police walked into my mother's house and she was sleeping. They took off her blankets off. Men, she was not dressed up. She was sleeping. Men took off her blankets. I live with that for the rest of my life, that some strange men came into my house and took off the blankets of my mother to search if she's not a terrorist. That is not real trauma, because it's not white. A Black child's trauma is not a trauma. We are still a traumatized nation, if you don't know, and that trauma is real.
Malema had an experience that makes him feel some kind of way about white people. He too needs to heal. Otherwise, he'll burn this country to the ground while we cheer him on. When sanctions are placed upon Zimbabwe, it's not because the Americans are racist. It's because what Zimbabwe did to the white farmers was not fair. It wasn't right. Sanctions were therefore placed on those leaders of government as well as any company that was associated with them, which in a country like Zimbabwe means that the biggest companies are probably affected. Would we have had the same comment when sanctions were placed on the South African apartheid government? No, we wouldn't have said it. So let's educate ourselves and let's stop allowing politicians to divide this country any further. The next time you hear the blanket statement that white people are racist, remember white people like Bram Fischer, who after his release from prison carried on underground activities for almost a year. He was arrested again and put on trial for a second time. He was found guilty and sentenced to life imprisonment for fighting against apartheid, for fighting against white racist people, for fighting on behalf of Black people. Nelson Mandela wrote in his 1995 autobiography, Fischer was one of the bravest and staunchest friends of the freedom struggle that I have ever known. From a prominent Afrikaner family, he gave up a life of privilege, rejected his heritage, and was ostracized by his own people, showing a level of courage and sacrifice that was in a class by itself. Allow me to rephrase the words of Bram Fischer and say, what is needed is for Black South Africans to shake themselves out of their complacency, a complacency intensified by the present political boom built upon racial discrimination. Thank you for watching. Please share the link to this video so that the truth spreads further than ignorance and propaganda. Please press the like button below and subscribe. And until next time, this is Citizen Concerned, and as always, beware of the comrades. Hi there, thank you so much for the support. Some of you have asked us to open a means to donate, fund, or support the patriotic work we are doing. Help us reach more people by joining our fight against corruption and the socialists threatening our country. You can give a super thanks, join as a member, or donate to the account number in the description below. Thank you. Now back to the video.